I don't have a big agenda for today. I think a couple topics to respond to from last week around the base tools project, and then I think we can see if there's been any progress on CodeQL, the pull requests, or there's any new opens for the week. Does anyone else have?
I've got one open for today around the CryptoPkg and Openssl lib.
All right. All right. Anyone else have any opens for today? All right. So Mike, I think a couple weeks ago we talked about base tools. I invited Joey to join us today. He's going to pick up some of the work on the base tools from the Microsoft side. I think, as we mentioned, and unfortunately, again, Bob isn't here, but as we mentioned, I think a lot of the work falls on Bob and the team there, as they are the main maintainers and contributors to base tools. I guess, are you able to relay a message to him?
Yes, I can do that, or you can just you can capture it in the minutes and make sure he's copied. And yes, I will also reach out to him. I think Christine is going to be the primary Intel rep for base tools work, and I think Bob will continue to be involved, but I think the actual development activities will be led by Christine.
Okay, Christine just joined. I think the main thing, as we kind of briefly talked about a couple weeks ago, was we will file some issues around a couple of the basic things where there's incorrect content and there's just kind of a lack of finishing the initial proof of concept for a Python project. The ask that we have would be that Intel would file issues for the work they're planning to do in base tools. So if we can bring some visibility to who's working on what in the base tools, I think that'll help us make sure we don't have conflicts.
When you say in base tools, you mean in the base tools directory in the EDK2?
I mean, the base tools Python project, which also has the mirror in base tools source Python.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, I think we've agreed in the past, and maybe it hasn't been followed 100%, is that all issues should be worked within the base tools Python repo first, and once it passes CIs and accepted there, then it can be mirrored to the EDK2 base tools directory.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like this. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. The patch. Let me think. Several weeks ago, the patch still merged into the ETK2 base tools firstly, and then merged into the base tools Python repo by Bob. And after the issue found, and I think with Bob, and Bob said he will merge the patch into the base tools repo firstly, and then merge them into the EDK2 base tool. Yes. And then the issue we encountered will not happen again.
Okay. I think I'd like to see that. So what I was saying is, number one, if Intel or you have work you're doing in base tools, the Python code in base tools, I'd like to see that put into an issue in the base tools project so that we can have an expectation for what kind of changes are coming. Secondly, if things on the mailing list come in for that change the Python code in base tools, we should redirect those submitters to the project and ask them to open an issue, contribute a PR, follow the PR development process over there. And then third, I think as things get submitted and the PRs completed in that project, that will automatically create a release that will get published to PyPy. We should probably then, at that point in time, take that change and submit it as a PR against EDK2 while updating the PyPy release version. And if it passes, add the push tag and get it in. Is that a reasonable process change that will hopefully drive a little more consistency?
Yes, but we also need to add the CI on the Python side to do more EDK2 builds with the changes before they get committed to the Base Tools Python project.
Yep.
Yes.
I put that in as an issue. And
Okay.
I think Joey's been familiar with what we did on PyTools extensions, and we'll do a very similar thing here. And I think the policy that we've traditionally said is that it's not required to pass because you may intentionally be creating a breaking change. But that should be intentional, and the reviewers should be aware of that if that's the plan.
Yeah, and I think in general, Sean, as far as Base Tools is concerned, I think we try really hard to never introduce a breaking change. It's great to add a new feature or an improved behavior, but carrying the technical debt of the compatibility with the existing is our preferred path and then we can eventually remove those old things after we get everybody downstream to adopt the new behavior. So I don't disagree with the idea that there are possible exceptions where there's a breaking change that may have to be introduced, but I think we should try really, really hard to never do that.
Sure. Okay.
So I think the default should be that the CI has to pass, and then through a exception process, kind of admin maintainer kind of permissions can force a change through, even if that CI check fails, if we all agree that's the right thing to do.
Okay. Any other comments on the Base Tools project? Okay, great. So hopefully we can get that in a little clearer state and maybe a roadmap that's a little more clear about what's coming. And I don't know if that includes any investments you guys are making on porting more of the C code to Python and or refactoring the Python so we can actually test it rather than just having to throw the EDK2 repo at it for integration testing.
All right, so maybe Christine, that's a good ask to you, is if you know of tasks that we are actually going to do as a roadmap, we have kind of resources allocated to actually do some tasks for Base Tools, maybe entering those as issues in the Base Tools Python project, and that's mostly to prevent duplication of effort by the rest of the community if there's somebody else looking at a similar, feature or task.
Mm-hmm. We are working on the task to transfer all the C tools in the EDK2 Base Tools to the Python version and merge them into the Base Tools Python repo. And after all the transfers done, the Base Tool in EDK2 can just be installed from the Python module.
Right. But I think that the ask is to go into the issues area of the Base Tools Python project and enter a separate issue for each tool that's going to be, converted that we're going to work on and assign an owner or something like that.
Okay. I will sign off the detailed plan with email.
Okay, sounds good. But that's the kind of stuff you're looking for, right, Sean? Is anything that others are looking at and actually going to be working on, get those in so that we all kind of can build a roadmap and plan releases and things like that based upon features.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Moving on, if there's nothing more on base tools, Michael, I don't know if you want to say anything on CodeQL.
Just that I did finalize the RFC and sent out an email to the mailing list. So far, I don't think there's been much feedback, so I take that as we'll proceed according to plan.
And did you set a close date for comments?
Let me see. I don't think I did in the email. I can maybe just do a follow up and let people know that we're looking for feedback on this, and maybe we'll get it by whatever the close date is. I guess end of the week would give people a lot of time. Because I think with the approach that we're taking to enable this query by query, we're not in a particular hurry to do anything. We know it's going to be a gradual process. So I'm fine with giving people the week to have time to think it over and respond, and then maybe next week we could start implementing the first query and the action there.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, I think, the message you want to convey is set a time frame for anybody to object to or express concerns about deploying this phased approach, and that and if no negative feedback is received by, pick a date, if that's 1 week from now, 2 weeks from now, then we will start deploying this, in a phased approach into our CI system.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'll send that update and I'll just let them know to respond by Friday of this week or so. And then next week, if there's no major concern, we'll go ahead and start the work on it.
Yep.
All right, great. Mike, do you want to give any updates on pull request reviews? I did see a few things in my email, but I've been trying to figure out how to help you test it more. But it looks like the changes coming in are still all around maintainers and code owner maintenance.
Yeah, let me share for just a minute so I can share some of the progress here in the past 2 weeks. Let me know if you can see the sharing.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm in the EDK2 code review repository, and I've got a few sample PRs here with some different types of changes. And this is all about trying to get to a point where we can have a GitHub action that can auto-assign reviewers, which takes a lot of what is currently manual effort today in the email-based code review to add the CC lines. So working on trying to get a very solid implementation of what developers are doing manually today, so we can eliminate the need to put the CC statements into the commit message format when we move to the GitHub-based code review style. And so I'm going to pick on this top one, which is likely one of our most complex kind of changes. It is one in which the files being modified are actually things like the maintainers.txt file is what we have in the current way of tracking our maintainers and reviewers for different areas of responsibility within the repository. And so in this example, I am changing for the GitHub workflows area, Michael Kubaki from a maintainer to a reviewer, and I'm promoting Sean from a reviewer to a maintainer. So this is an example where for the maintainer and reviewer assignments, we have the EDK2 stewards as the maintainers. So they're the blocking code reviews, but we also want to make sure that everybody involved in the change in roles or assignments is also notified. And that doesn't just mean Michael and Sean, it also means the peer maintainers and reviewers for the area that's impacted. So that would be myself and Lemeen. You'd also want to inform them for the review request of the change of roles within that area of responsibility. And so there's with this new style, we have a code owners and a reviewers file, which expresses the same information. And this is the code owners and reviewer files are the ones that are actually used in the new pull request code review style. Now, what happens here in the past, as I was working on the GitHub action, is the GitHub actions were either being done by a bot that was the GitHub Actions bot, and there's a default set of permissions that bot gets. And in some cases, that bot does not have enough permissions to do what we need to do within our GitHub action. Mainly around the ability to read all of our organization members is not available. It also doesn't have the permission to have write permission to the pull request itself to send a review request. So the next step I took was to use a personal access token that I had to create in my own developer area. So when I ran the action in with that set of permissions from the token I generated for me, it was now showing that MD Kinney was the one doing the action and was asking for review requests and things like that of a developer. So then it was tied to an individual, in this case, me, because I'm the one who created the personal access token. I found a description of how to go create basically an empty GitHub application where it gets assigned a name, gets allocated an application ID, and gets allocated a PEM file for its private key. It is not associated with a webhook, external, or any other service or server that's running remotely. It is basically an empty GitHub application. But once you have this name and ID and private key, you can use it to generate tokens for the GitHub action that you want to run with the personality of that application. So what I did is I created an application called Tiano Core Assign Reviewers inside of the Tiano Core organization. So it's now not tied to any one of the individual members of the community from a permission perspective. It is part of our Tiano Core community. It's our own bot. And actually GitHub will let us create up to 100 applications. So we could have 100 different bots as far as a limit of what we can do here. And I gave this bot the minimum set of permissions needed to run this assign reviewers task, which includes the organization read permissions and the pull request write permissions. So now when we run our GitHub action, you see now this bot has assigned me to as one of the assignees and has requested a review from Sean and Michael because their responsibilities have changed within this within the maintainers.txt, and Lemming Gao's appear for the area that was modified. So if I look at the top here, you now see the result of this is that Andrew Fish and Leif Lindholm were added as maintainers. They have the code owners. So GitHub did this automatically based upon the contents of the code owners file. The assign reviewers bot for Tiano Core added me as the assignee because I'm the one that submitted the pull request, and then added Sean and Michael and Lemine as review requesters to this review. So that's the improvement over the last couple of weeks is twofold. We now have we now know the recipe to go create our own bots with the correct permissions to do work, and updated the assign reviewers to not only handle normal code changes and assign the code owners and reviewers correctly, but also support changes to the code owners and reviewers files themselves to make sure that the activity that we're currently doing in Tiano Core for the CC line rules are being followed for those two files as well. So, and then if you look at the status down here, none of these have been reviewed yet, but you can see that this requires code owners if this won't go green until either Leif or Andrew were to accept it, and that there's no unresolved conversations. If there were, those all have to be resolved before it's ready for merge. The checks that are being run now, you see the assign reviewers check. This is the one that takes about 7 to 10 seconds to run and does those review assignments that you saw in the upper right corner of this page. It also checks that the code owners and reviewers files contain or have all the right content, meaning all the users in there are valid users. All the files are covered by the coders and reviewers that are listed. There's about 7 checks that it does for consistency of those files and correctness of those files. And then there's one other check that also verifies that the code owners, reviewers, and maintainers files, all 3 of them are consistent with each other. That's more of a, as a getting started with this new process. I think our organization, our community as a whole is used to maintaining maintainers.txt, and they'll have to learn the slight syntax differences of code owners and reviewers files, and we'll have to update those as well. If those are not consistent with each other, it will fail one of these quick checks so that they can get those aligned. So that's more of a helper facility until we retire maintainers.txt and we're all really comfortable with the code owners and reviewers syntax. And then below this is all the normal checks that are kicked off from our normal Azure pipeline CI. So what you see here is a mix of GitHub Actions CI steps and Azure pipeline CI steps all together. And then it's obviously blocked right now because some of these checks have failed. And like, for example, one of the interesting constraints about assigning reviewers, this came out of the validator for the reviewers file, and it found that, for example, there's still 5 team members that are listed as reviewers that have not joined the EDK2 reviewers team. So they are not a collaborator in the Tiano Core organization yet, which means even though they're listed as a reviewer, the assign reviewers action cannot assign them to a pull request. And in fact, I've added a check for that as well to make sure that anybody being added as a reviewer is also a collaborator with Tiano Core. And if they're not, it'll mark that as a warning from the assign reviewers action and won't actually assign them. And I leave it to this action to actually make it an error condition so that we can make sure we get the right people invited. We have some detailed things to work through from a process perspective when we're modifying the code owners or reviewers files and we're bringing new team members into the community. We have to figure out in what order do we actually invite them to the organization with respect to the pull request under review when they're being invited for the very first time. Do we think that invite needs to be done and completed before the PR can be accepted with them added to the code owners and reviewers file? So I'm interested in feedback, from this group as a starting point and from the community as a whole for that process to add new community members either to the reviewers or the maintainers teams. So I'll pause there for any comments about the status on this.
I mean, it looks good. As far as on your last question there, I think you want to always have a valid set of files, and I guess there's nothing stopping someone from getting rid of their GitHub account and all of a sudden your file's not being valid. But so I think you'd in general want to say that people have approved the PR. It hasn't yet been merged because the file isn't valid because they aren't yet a member of your organization. You would then go add them, and that would be the last step for it to get finalized and completed.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, one of my next step is really to start writing up these scenarios and really kind of provide a good summary of what our current we have links to our current development process, the email-based one, and I want to describe the new one. For example, not doing the CC lines, not having to do the reviewed by, act by, or tested by tags into the commit message. So the commit message just has the subject, the description, link to the issue or Bugzilla as appropriate, and then the signed off by is the only tag that's required. And that, the only time you should have to update any of your commits through the review process is if you actually have review comments either against the description in the commit message or actual content within the code changes themselves. Those are the only reasons to, push a new version of your commits. And so that's the proposed method here. And I know we've had some discussions about, single patch reviews versus multi-patch reviews. And I still have to do some investigation of what if any information is being lost by GitHub in those scenarios to determine the necessity of the email archive or not. So so I want to write up a proposal, and I actually want to then send that out and invite any of the community members that want to come into this EDK2 code review repository and do a parallel review of maybe a current email submission and submit it over here as well to do some trial runs through some real code reviews to see what they think of the process, and really leave that up to the community members as a whole to volunteer that. And we'll see if we get any traction. If we don't get any direct traction, maybe some of our team members here can go pick up some of those email-based, patch series and push them into this area to trial run them here as well.
Where did we land on people submitting PRs? Like, once it's fully approved and it passes all the CI checks, can they just hit merge, or do we still require the push label?
I'm going to suggest as a starting point that we keep the push label, and that it does require one of the maintainers or stewards. They're the only ones that have the permissions to set labels, that one of those two groups sets the push label for Mergify to do the work. Because really that's Mergify that's looking for the push label. I know, Sean, you brought up the possibility that with some of the more recent GitHub features being added, it appears that GitHub is getting close to Mergify in capabilities, for at least the subset of Mergify features that we're using. So we may be able to simplify our set of services that we depend upon to reduce Mergify. But at least for a starting point, I don't want to combine too many things at once. And what we're trying to do here, the primary goal is to move our code review activity from email to pull requests. So I'm okay with leaving the push label as required to start with, and we can leave that as a further optimization.
Okay, because one of the common points of confusion among maintainers is if you have a patch series that targets multiple packages, no one merges it unless you pick who. So one of the gaps in the current process is it's not clear who is supposed to finally merge the patch series. I mean, I as a maintainer can go in, as we've seen recently, and I can just say, okay, well, I got all the approvals I need. I'm going to add the push tag, but not everyone can do that.
Right, you have to be a maintainer to do that, or in the case of this new style, you have to be a code owner, which means you're a part of the member of the EDK2 maintainers team, which means you have the ability to add labels.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I think this will accelerate our code review process, and therefore it will allow us to reach that point sooner. And I think maybe people will be more confident to add the push label if they can see everything in the PR rather than have to go dig around tons of emails and see what changed across different. So I think having all the information there will maybe help the process. So it sounds fine to me to leave it with the push label. I think that will naturally, things will go a little smoother, hopefully, for that just with this. The other option is I was thinking we just have a bot randomly pick a maintainer or something and say you're the one chosen to add the push label, just so it essentially moves the process along and says, you approve this and now it has everything it needs except the push label. Why don't you add the push label now?
Yeah, I mean, and that would be a fairly simple bot to implement as well, to say, for example, if we have PRs that are 100% green, right? Everything is ready, right? And they've been idle for more than, 24 or 48 hours. Send a fresh notification to all of the EDK2 maintainers that were assigned. So that would be the ones with these icons. Send a reminder to them that there are PRs that appear to be ready, but need to have the push label added if they're really ready. And I can imagine many reasons why there's some extra time given, because it may be that some of these reviewers have done some reviews, but the maintainers are waiting for some additional reviews to complete. So it may be all green, but they're looking for a specific person to provide their review comments. You know,
Right. And I think I think the reminder is still good though, because then they can say that in the comment section, right? Just to clear the
Yep.
discussion and just be like, okay, this looks good to me, but I'm waiting on at whoever to add their approval or something.
Yep.
Even that's useful to capture.
Yes. So yeah, so that would be, so Sean, maybe capture that in the minutes, that there's a potential need for a bot to you know, to notify code owners when PRs are ready for merge.
Okay, sounds good.
And I know this gets into that category of, you know, once we're in the using the GitHub tools here, there's all kinds of things we can do around PRs and issues with bots to help with reminders and automatic, you know, moving things through the process through some automation when appropriate and things like that.
Yep.
All right, and if you're curious, I've got a second PR here that's more of just a, in this case, it's a change to base tools only. So this is not the complicated scenario. This is a normal, you know, change to a directory, you know, a code directory, in this case, base tools scripts patch check with a small change there. And in this case, the code owners assigned were Bob and Lemming, and the required reviewer added to it was Christine. And in this case, because it took me a while to get all this working, the conversation's kind of long, but after I reset it and had the Tiana Core assigned reviewers bot active, you see that it was assigned to me because I'm the one that submitted the PR, and it only had to request one additional review from Christine because GitHub automatically requested the maintainers of Bob and Lemming. So this is what a normal code review one would look like. It's a little bit simpler.
Okay, sounds good. Do you have a timeline for the next step? I mean, you know, can we, like the CodeQL one, can we say that there'll be a next step starting next week, or?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get the proposed process and ask of the community to try this out with like some peer reviews between the email and here by the end of this week. So so you can put that down as the next target here, is to get that RFC out with the proposed process change and request of the community to try it out. As I said, there's just the one open issue as to whether or not the email archive is required or not. If the email archive is required, that's still going to take some more time to get that into place. But let's hope that maybe we can get by without the email archive. That's my hope. It's just a simpler process overall if we can get there.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on this topic?
I don't know if it's documented anywhere, but people that are maybe were used to the Git email process, they may or may not know that you can add .patch to the end of a PR and it gives you the patch for the PR. So that's an easy way for them to, you know, just get a patch to apply if they want to do that locally following their old process, if they wrote any tools or anything like that around it.
You talk about up here, the web link, you mean?
Yeah, like for example, this is the patch for your PR, right?
Oh, for like all the file changes. It's not the actual commits themselves, but it's the
yeah, it's the actual Git patch that they can apply.
okay. And if there's
so
more than one, what happens?
I think it splits them up. We can try it and see.
Yeah.
But it's just a trick for people that may be like, I just want to get a patch for this because that's what I'm used to. They can just grab the patch if they want it real quick by doing that.
Okay.
All right. I think we're on to the new open, which is the CryptoPkg and Openssl.
Yes. Let me find that one. I've got an email I was writing up with a summary of the issues here. Probably not very many people paid attention much to the EDK2, the devil mailing list conversations around the OpenSSL lib. There's a number of activities going on. One of them is from some Intel development about adding ecliptic curve features. Another one is from a Microsoft developer adding some optimized assembly implementations of some of the APIs for IE32 and x64. And what I am observing is it is a dizzying matrix of combinations of the OpenSSL lib, which is a lib below the base crypt lib that we actually are the real APIs that, as the public APIs, we use out of the crypto package for crypto services from the rest of the EDK2 packages. So here's a couple observations. The first one was one I was not clear on until I went and dug into some history. Before these changes in the past few weeks that have been out for review for a while, but they're actually getting committed now. One is there were two INF files for the OpenSSL lib. One is openssl-lib.inf and one is openssl-lib-crypto.inf. The difference is that the crypto version removes the SSL files from the OpenSSL lib build. And from looking at the commit history, this extra INF was added to reduce the security review overhead for use of the OpenSSL lib. And it also seems to be the default OpenSSL lib instance that is used by the majority of the EDK2 repo. So I guess if you don't need SSL services, you can get by with that one. It does not actually save you any size that I'm aware of. It was purely to say there's a version of it that uses fewer files. So if you have to do a security review for your product, you have less code to review with that version. So didn't know, was everybody aware of that, or is that kind of new information for this audience?
To be honest, we were aware of this. I'm trying to look up what we do right now. I think I can acknowledge your same statement of it's a little crazy, and we got it right to where we wanted and haven't touched it in a while, but I'm looking up what details we're using.
Sure. So the second bullet point here is about the fact that there's now, it's actually been checked in already, the ability to build the OpenSSL lib with the ecliptic curve files included in the OpenSSL build. Even if your configuration of your base crypt lib does not actually turn on any of the EC APIs or any APIs that depend upon those ciphers being present. The side effect is that just building those files without even using a single EC service grows the base crypt lib by, on average, 100 kilobytes, even though you're not using a single thing from those directories. You know, my brief evaluation of what's going on is they've got this kind of magic common data structure inside of OpenSSL with, I think, the list of ciphers. That's a complex data, it's a nested data structure, but it's got basically the list of ciphers that are enabled. And because if you're using just the basic set and then you go build EC, it extends that global data structure with the EC services. So then you instantly carry all the overhead of the code of the EC services because there's a data structure that references the APIs. So it pulls in more code, even though all you've done from maybe the service that you're calling is walk through, make reference to that data structure, but not use all the fields of the data structure with the EC, like not using the EC ciphers. So it's unfortunate that it has that attribute, and that's just an internal OpenSSL implementation artifact. So in order to deal with our size-sensitive areas of firmware, they wanted to make this configurable for the OpenSSL build independent of enabling services in the base cryptlib. So they now have a PCD called OpenSSL EC enabled, which has nothing to do with enabling services in base cryptlib. It only enables the building of the EC source files in the OpenSSL lib. So this is similar in concept to what was done with this split between these two INFs, where this has SSL files, this does not have SSL files, and now this has SSL files, and whether or not this is true or false, you then get the EC files. Everybody following me so far?
Yep.
Okay. Now, Christopher, it's a great optimization. I think it has some really significant performance benefits, right, Sean, for the optimized APIs?
Yeah, I think we heard like 12 times or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal, you know. So now there is the current commit has actually 4 new INFs. I have a PR that merges them back down to a single INF with the optimized ones, and I also have an update to that PR that then merges in what the work that's done with EC. So now we have an optimized version of lib that has mostly C code, has the SSL files there by default, has some of the C files substituted with assembly files, I believe, from these set of defines for SHA-1, SHA-256, SHA-512, ASNI, and those two, I guess hash. I don't know what DVPAES is, and a hash algorithm. So those things have assembly optimizations for them in place of the C files. And then it also has the ability to turn the EC files on and off through that PCD. So it mirrors the work that was done on this INF. So this new one, has that support. So I can actually, say that's what I'm working on now, is that. So then at this point, after this simplification of the PR I'm working on, we're down to 3 OpenSSL libs. The crypto one, which I don't know if we want this one to have the option of being optimized with SSL files removed. Somebody tell me if that's an interesting use case. And then we have this one that has SSL files, and now with the update here, the ability to turn on EC files, but it's not optimized. And then we have this one, which has SSL files and the ability to optionally enable the EC files, and has IA32 and x64 optimized APIs for a small set of the base crypt lib services. And so when I look at this is like, 8, 16, kind of variations, flavors of the OpenSSL lib alone, as far as how we build the OpenSSL code itself. And then on top of that, we can go into the base crypt lib and, pick which individual services are enabled and disabled. And if you turn off a bunch of them, you may see some size benefits. If there are services you don't need in the PEI phase or the Dixie phase or the SMM phase, you can size to fit each use case for the subset that you need, and you may see some size benefits. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you do, because of the attributes of the OpenSSL implementation. Sometimes turning off a service does not actually get you a size benefit by the way that the code inside of OpenSSL is composed. So I'd like to see us reduce the total number of INFs if possible. The other thing I observe about this is all of these things that are being done in this scope are all libraries. And we don't really have a good way to specify PCD settings or defines at the library scope. We only do those really at the module scope. And then, for building that module, or we have to set the PCDs or defines that we want to apply to libraries at the platform global scope. So this makes it hard from a platform perspective. It kind of means that if we collapse to a single INF, we can only build one version that's used everywhere. If we keep the separate INFs, it maybe provides an opportunity to have, different things turned on in different phases, depending on which one you use. That's why I'm raising this as an issue in this forum, is that this has gotten really complicated and a really dizzying array of library, a single OpenSSL library with a lot of different variations to it. And how do we want to manage this at the platform scope? So that's kind of the open issue there from one perspective. And then I've observed a couple other things, and I just wanted to check with you, Sean, because I think you're the one who, for the CryptoPkg, you wanted to enable some null libs in order to improve our CI performance. And I observed that there were actually some build breaks in the CryptoPkg with our default package build because there were missing lib instances. So I'm of the opinion now that when we have a code change to the CryptoPkg, we do want to do the more complete build of the CryptoPkg itself to make sure, for example, all these different variations of libs all build and there's no regressions with them. But when we go and build other packages that need to link against the crypto services, we can use the null crypto services for that scenario in order to improve the build time of those other ones. Does that make sense, Sean? Was that your intent?
So yeah, I mean, I think the intent always has been that if you're building within the CryptoPkg, you need to build all instances. And so our hope would be that even though if you have a dependency, you may resolve that dependency with a null, you should still be building all instances of the library, and that should be catching any build break. So I'm curious to see what's been missed there.
Yeah, so what was missed is all the lib instances were being built, but the problem is that some of those, for example, the package scope build only did the lib instances, and then the all build would, for example, build the CryptoPkg, CryptoDixie, and CryptoSMM modules. And those builds would break because there was a missing lib instance for the synchronization lib, and one other library that was, or I think the UEFI runtime, not the UEFI runtime services. It was for sure it was the synchronization lib and one other, and it was because there was the parallel hash functions that were added, and the package build always passed because it only built the libraries, but it didn't verify that there was resolution of all of its library's dependencies, like it introduced a dependency on the synchronization lib and the parallel hash functions. And so then when you finally went around to building the modules in the CryptoPkg, they would break. And that was not caught by CI because we never built the full version. So that's what I'm suggesting, is that we always build the full version, including the modules, to make sure that our library dependencies are all mapped correctly.
Okay, but I guess what I'm asking, so we are building the modules. All the modules in CryptoPkg are getting built as well. Again, they are resolving their library dependencies through using a null library, which means that their library dependencies may not have additional library dependencies, like the synchronization lib, right?
Yes. So I think
But
it was using the null OpenSSL lib.
It's not a bug in the CryptoPkg at that point. It's a bug in the DSC file of trying to build that.
Yes. Yes.
So I think where we've had a little bit of, we've kind of ignored, maybe a little disconnect, is we view the CryptoPkg DSC as a CI element and is only useful for that, because I don't think you're going to be able to tune that appropriately to apply to a lot of different people's projects because of the things you talked about above.
Yep.
As well as you actually missed out on like 3/4 of the configuration, which still comes in through the base crypt lib and how you're configuring all that as well, right?
Yeah, that's this right here. That's the family enable, the structured PCD.
Right. But that brings us, at least for us, that brings us with 16 more INFs. And so when you want to talk about how it gets complicated, that's where it gets even more complicated.
Yep.
So I think, I guess, again, my point is that I don't think you can build a DSC file as appropriate for community consumption without knowing what their platform is and what they need. And so I guess my point is, I don't view that DSC as an artifact that someone should try to use to build for anything other than CI. So I don't think that's where the disconnect is.
Sure. Okay. And the other thing I'll point out is that there are host-based unit tests and target-based unit tests also now in this package. So in my opinion, once you get to these kinds, and the target-based tests are run from the shell. So at that point, you have very few size constraints, right? So when I think about all these options above, it's like we can build those with the maximum configuration, right? All SSL, all EC. We have optimization and enabled and disabled as maybe two different scenarios that are important to run through host-based unit testing and potentially target-based unit testing from the shell. But a lot of the constraints of, for why we ended up with the combinations above had to do with size more than anything else. And those size constraints disappear when we're into unit testing. Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. And then the only thing that's missing then that gets kind of crazy is host-based unit test. I realize now that there's actually some gaps in our host-based unit testing, because host-based unit testing does default alignment at 250 4K for code and data. And there's some attributes of the optimized OpenSSL libs that increase the alignment requirements to 256 bytes, which is above the default of 64 bytes or 32 bytes for our normal alignment. So there's some interesting questions about, there's a gap of host-based unit testing has an assumption of 4K alignment, and it's difficult to test things below 4K alignment. So I observed that. The second thing that appears to be a gap in host-based unit testing, specifically for the OpenSSL lib, with the addition of the assembly-based optimizations, the source code, the assembly source code for IE32 and x64 are different. Today, I think our host-based unit tests only build and run the 64-bit, version. They don't do the 32-bit version. I think this is an example where there's actually code that's different that's different for the 32-bit version.
So yes, we only build, to be more direct, we only build the architecture that your host is running at, right? So whatever architecture you are, which for most of us is x64, that's what we build for our host-based test.
Yep.
And I agree, we've talked about a little bit that we could be running IA32 as well. I don't know, we never came to a conclusion, and in most cases it doesn't matter, but I agree it could be added.
Okay.
For the optimized stuff, I think there's another round of problems, which is you actually don't know what your capabilities of your CPU are on your and the OS that you're running on your host the host machine. In fact, this makes those instructions somewhat difficult to do widespread as well, because you never know what you're running on, and does it have the native instructions for that?
It does a CPU ID check. The inside of OpenSSL lib, it has its own CPU ID checker for capabilities.
And what happens when does it fall back to the older implementation?
I've not reviewed the logic to see what it does, but at least it looks like they try, right?
Okay, I thought we hit some problem here. I don't know, Michael, if you remember anything.
I think the problem that we hit was more that there wasn't PEI support, if I remember right. I don't remember anything in particular on the test, like host testing side related to it. I guess it would be good for the tester to know what they're testing, though. I mean, burying things down and skipping over executing the actual instructions is not really a test, I guess. It's a test that their logic can determine what CPU we're on and react appropriately. but it doesn't necessarily test the same behavior that someone with the instructions would be testing.
Right. Correct. And that's where the target-based testing is at least an approach where we've got the shell-based ones, and with OBMF we can change which CPU is mapped in, right?
Is there a modern enough CPU in OVMF or in QEMU that we can actually do that?
Not sure. That's a good thing to investigate as well.
I don't think there is. But that, I agree, that would be a good thing to check. Okay.
And obviously we still want the null instances to improve the build time. So I mean, I agree with your assessment that, you know, what are you trying to test with the CI build versus what are we trying to do for example, for publishing binaries of the, you know, the crypto Dixie, CryptoPkg, crypto SMM modules, right? And whether or not we think we could be successful in having a number of flavors of those that would be reusable as is versus it's always something that's customized at the platform level. Don't even try, right? And I think your opinion is it's always customized at the platform level. Don't even try, right?
Well, we try. We still do publish binaries and actually find it extremely valuable. And I think we'd like to see the ecosystem move that model because as we talk about, you know, security incidences and response to all that, like known binaries and having less variety in the ecosystem would be a huge benefit.
Yep.
But I guess my point is it's very complicated and you need a lot of coordination and understanding on all sides of everyone who's using them. That's my main point.
Okay. And I guess for my point of this conversation is just really to highlight this is, you know, a combination of some attributes of the OpenSSL lib and its impact on our crypto services and interaction with our CI system and its features, and also interaction with base tools. And that's the last topic I have is I found, for example, that, you know, for this EC enabled PCD up here, we're using a feature flag expression in an INF file, but it doesn't pay attention to the setting of that PCD from the -- PCD flag on the command line. It's a bug. It only takes the value from the DSC file or the DEC default. It doesn't use the command line override value, which causes build breaks because it then gets like confused. And so that's a real bug. My second open with the base tools is, do we want to allow use of structured PCD fields in feature flag expressions? That's not supported today. I was thinking originally that I could actually use some fields of this family enable instead of this EC enabled. I could say, hey, if there's certain families that are enabled, then we want to turn on the EC source files in the OpenSSL build instead of having two separate PCDs or two layers of PCDs that the platform developer has to get correct. But with my, you know, observation of these are libraries and we have only global settings available for these things, this gets, you know, complicated to get it right for all of our phases. So I think I need to go back and think about that some more. So I may not necessarily ask for this one, but I do observe that it is a gap that if you think you can use a structured PCD field name in a feature flag expression, A, if you try to do it, it doesn't break the build, and B, it uses the value of the entire structure and ignores that the field was actually specified. So it's always true because the structures tend to be non-zero in their integer values if you evaluate them as a very large integer. So it's some odd behavior from our build system today if you attempt to use structured PCD field values in feature flag expressions.
Okay.
So Christine, if you're still online, if you could look at 4081, that'd be great. If you could see if there's a quick fix for that.
Sure, I will check about it.
Okay. And I'll think more about this second one and this library configuration combination of things and continue to discuss this with the CryptoPkg owners. Sean, if you want, I can forward you this set of notes if you want to put them into your minutes.
Sure. Yeah. If you send that to me, I'll put them in there.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add to this, Sean, as far as, how to make this simpler? I'm very concerned about the platform developer trying, and how they figure out how to get this right.
I mean, I guess that's going to be my one piece of feedback here is that I don't think everything described here still makes it easy for a platform developer to get it right.
Correct.
Even if you're to resolve, most of these, I think it's still hard because you have that next layer that is the crypto service family PCD thing that drives all sorts of changes.
Yep.
But I think this is a start. And I did look up ours. We are not using the crypto version. And I think that was a simplification for us. We also, I saw you mention to Chris around the alignment. We do align all of these in our use case because we do want to support NX for our boot services as well. So we do page align everything. We don't use the build options you see there.
You do not do this right here?
Correct.
Okay. Because you've done your platform scoped alignment, you've overridden it to a larger alignment for everybody?
For everything, although we are sensitive around, traditionally IA32 modules that are PEI because they're XIP. We don't necessarily align those or support NX in that environment.
Okay. So this is some of the updates I'm working on for the CryptoPkg DSC to be able to build with the optimized one and pass the link stage.
Okay.
And part of this is also, as far as beyond a CI build, this also, provides a bit of a recipe for how to integrate these modules, right? Or to integrate use of the crypto libraries inside of other modules.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think we've taken a different approach, which is we produce the binaries that produce the protocols, and then the caller is able to, and then any platform is able to leverage the base crypt libs that use the protocol or PPI.
Yep. Yes.
And then that has detection of whether the binaries support the usage you want anyways.
Yep.
And so I think, unfortunately, it's proven extremely complicated to get these crypto builds both size constrained down to what you need, as well as, understanding what's in there.
Right.
But we figure out at least out that we do it as a binary so that we do it once for our entire set of, architectural platforms.
Sure. Yeah, and that's one of my primary asks of the CryptoPkg maintainers or developers is let's at least write down all of the information into the code in the DEC file, DSC file, INF files that describe these things, and or maybe it's a separate wiki page with how to use the CryptoPkg contents and libraries, and get them configured correctly. We have to at least write down how a platform developer can follow a recipe to get the settings correct. If we can make it simpler, I'm all for making it simpler. But until we can make it simpler, we at least have to write down so that the platform developer knows what to do.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, that's all I got, Sean, on this topic.
All right, sounds good. Any opens from anyone? There's been a couple new joins. Anyone have anything? All right, I'll upload the recording and see everyone next week. Thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.